I'm Nam, 32 years old, the youngest son of Dolores Wilson, an 85-year-old woman who, until recently, was the epitome of grace and vitality. Growing up in San Diego, I was always the quiet one, the overlooked one in the family. My older sister, Catherine, always commanded attention with her charm and ambition, while I learned to hide in the shadows, barely making my presence known. As a child, I didn't mind it too much. I was content with my place in the background. But somewhere along the way, that sense of invisibility turned into something more, resentment. I've always been the black sheep of the family, the one who didn't fit the mold they created for themselves, the one who could never quite keep up. Now, as an adult, I realized that my role in this family was never meant to be anything more than a pawn in a much larger game. And this moment, my mother's 85th birthday, will be the day everything changes. The day I find out just how far they'll go to take what they want, no matter who gets hurt. My mother thought we were celebrating her life. I'm starting to think we're just celebrating her death. The community center was as pristine as always, adorned with balloons and streamers that my sister, Catherine, insisted on personally arranging every year. She's always been like that, the perfect daughter, the one who had everything in control. I could never keep up. It was her thing to host these grand events, to make it all seem picture perfect. And the rest of us? We were just part of the backdrop. But today was different. Today, as my mother sat at the head table, laughing with her friends, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. "You good?" Jason's voice broke my reverie. I looked over at my son, his face tense, lips set in a firm line. He'd been acting strange all evening, shifting from his usual protective self to something darker, more serious. "Yeah, why?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. He gave me that look, the one he had when something was bothering him but he couldn't quite say it. Then he leaned in close and whispered, "Get your bag. We're leaving. Act like nothing's wrong." At first, I thought it was just his usual overdramatic self. Jason had always been a bit too protective of me, especially after my divorce. But when he grabbed my elbow, his fingers cold and tight, I felt something in my gut, a knot of dread. He wasn't just being his usual self. Something was wrong. Very wrong. I stood up, trying to play it off, forcing a smile as I looked back at the room. My mother, radiant in her pink dress, was busy cutting her cake while the rest of the guests applauded. Catherine was snapping pictures, her smile sharp and practiced. Paul, her husband, was making the rounds, refilling drinks. Everything was normal, too normal. "We need to go," Jason muttered, pulling me toward the exit. My legs felt heavy, my heart pounding in my chest. What the hell was going on? As we passed through the crowd, I couldn't help but feel like I was being watched. I kept my eyes ahead, but the tension in the air was palpable, thick as the suffocating heat of summer. Jason's grip on my arm tightened, his face pale as we reached the door. The moment we stepped outside, I felt the cool rush of the night air hit me like a slap in the face. "What's happening?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Jason's eyes were wide with fear, his jaw clenched. "We need to get to the car, now." I looked at him, my stomach sinking. Something was off, and I had no idea how deep this went. The car was parked just a few feet away, the headlights casting long shadows on the pavement. As soon as we reached the door, Jason locked it. He turned to face me, his voice low but urgent. "Mom, something's very wrong." "What do you mean?" I asked, my pulse racing now, the sense of dread growing inside me. Jason pulled out his phone, his hands shaking as he pressed play on the voice recording. I listened to the muffled voices of Catherine and Paul, too clear in their intentions. They'd done it. They'd manipulated my mother, signed her name on documents she didn't understand. The documents for her house, the ones Catherine said were just for insurance updates. The very house where I grew up. The house my mother had swore she'd never leave. "It's too late," Jason whispered. "They've already filed the paperwork. Your mother doesn't even know." The ground seemed to tilt beneath me as the reality of what was happening sank in. I couldn't breathe. I wanted to scream, to rage, to storm back into the community center and drag my mother out of there, but Jason was right. We couldn't do that. Not yet. If we go back now, they'll know we're onto them, Jason said, his voice trembling. We have to call the police first. The feeling in my chest tightened, cold and suffocating. How had I missed this? How had I not seen the signs? Catherine, my own sister, she had been planning this for months, maybe years. Using my mother as a pawn in some twisted game of greed. I didn't know what to do or how to feel. Anger, betrayal, fear, they all crashed together in a tidal wave that threatened to drown me. We need to go, Jason said, his voice trembling with urgency. Now. We drove, the silence between us heavy and thick, until we reached the police station. The building loomed ahead, its cold, fluorescent lights flickering as though they knew the storm that was about to hit. We stepped inside, and I looked at the officer behind the counter. The moment Jason explained our situation, the officer's face went from routine indifference to pure focus. This way, the officer said, leading us down a narrow hallway. My hands were trembling as I gripped my purse tightly, trying to hold myself together. I didn't know how long I could keep up this facade. We were about to make the call that would change everything. Just as we reached the door to the detective's office, I heard the unmistakable sound of a car screeching to a halt outside. Get ready, Jason said quietly. I wasn't ready. I would never be ready. But in that moment, I knew one thing for sure, this was just the beginning. And no matter what happened, I couldn't let my mother go down without a fight. The police station was colder than I expected, the fluorescent lights flickering above our heads, casting an artificial pallor over everything. I followed Jason into the interview room, my mind still reeling from what we'd just learned. The voice recording was now in the hands of the officers, but the damage was done. My sister Catherine, my own flesh and blood, had been conspiring to steal everything from my mother. Jason kept his gaze focused on the door, his lips pressed into a thin line. His usual calm demeanor was gone, replaced by something darker, something sharp. I could feel the tension between us, even though we hadn't spoken much since we left the car. The reality of what we were up against hadn't fully settled in yet. But it was coming. Fast. The door swung open with a squeak, and a detective walked in. He was tall, his shoulders broad in a dark jacket, his face stern, but not unfriendly. He held out his hand. Detective Nolan, he said, his voice low and steady. I understand you have some information that could help us. Jason nodded, his jaw tight. Yes. We recorded a conversation between Catherine and Paul, her husband. They've been planning to have my mother committed to a nursing home and sell her house. The papers have already been signed. Nolan sat down across from us, his expression never wavering. I'm going to need that recording. But we'll need more than just this. He slid a small notepad across the table. Names, dates, anything you've got on who else might be involved. I leaned forward, the weight of the situation crashing down on me. What do you mean? Who else could be involved? Nolan's eyes locked onto mine, cold and calculating. This isn't just about a house. It's about control, money, and power. Your sister and her husband aren't the only ones pulling the strings. If you think they've been acting alone, you're wrong. I felt my chest tighten. You think there's more to this? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he flipped through his notepad, his pen tapping against the paper. Someone's been coordinating this from the shadows. I'm going to need you to trust me. This could get worse before it gets better. The door behind him opened again, and a second officer stepped inside, holding a folder. He handed it to Nolan without a word. Nolan flipped it open, scanning the pages quickly, his expression changing slightly, though only for a moment. More documents? Jason asked, his voice barely audible. Nolan nodded. We've got a tip about a private investigator. A guy named Marcus Webb. He's been hired by several families to, well, let's just say, facilitate these kinds of transitions. I felt my stomach drop. You mean to? Exactly, Nolan interrupted, his voice sharp. He's been helping families like yours, like your mother's, by declaring them mentally unfit and moving them into facilities. Also, the children can take control of their estates. I need everything you know about Catherine and Paul. Now. The air felt heavier. Jason's eyes darkened. I didn't think they'd go this far. I thought it was just a power grab, but this is bigger, Nolan said, cutting him off. We're looking at elder abuse, fraud, and possibly something even worse. We need to move fast. I stared at him, my mind racing. What happens now? Now, Nolan said, pushing the folder toward us, we get the ball rolling. We need to find out who else is in on this. Who else has been using web services? This is just the beginning, but we've got a chance to stop it before it gets any worse. I felt a chill run down my spine. The thought of my mother being taken from me, manipulated by the people she trusted most, was unbearable. But Nolan was right. We had to act fast. The pieces were moving, and I could already hear the clock ticking. Jason leaned forward, his face tense. What do we do now? Now, Nolan said, his eyes narrowing, we make sure your mother is safe. We track down Marcus Webb and find out who else is involved. But we can't waste any more time. Your mother is the key, and if we don't protect her, everything will fall apart. The door opened again, and a new officer stepped inside. Detective, we've got something. He handed Nolan a folder, his face tense. Nolan flipped it open, his gaze scanning the contents quickly. I could see his jaw tighten as he read. What is it? Jason asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Nolan's eyes locked onto mine. Your mother's signature. It's been tampered with. I froze. What? The paperwork she signed for the power of attorney, Nolan explained. It wasn't just manipulated. It was forged. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. I couldn't breathe. My mother had been tricked. All along, I had believed she had signed those papers of her own free will, but now it was clear they had been using her. Nolan stood up, his expression hardening. We've got work to do. You need to stay here. We'll be in touch. Jason and I exchanged a glance as Nolan and the other officer left the room. The silence that followed was suffocating. My mind raced. My mother was in danger, and I was running out of time. I don't know what to do, I whispered, more to myself than to Jason. How could I have missed this? You didn't miss it, Jason replied. You didn't know. But we're going to fix it. I wasn't so sure. But I had to believe him. I had to believe that we could still save her. The door clicked open again, and a uniformed officer stepped inside, handing me my phone. It's for you. I took it, my hand shaking, and brought it to my ear. Hello? Mom, my mother's voice crackled through the phone, weak and distant. I need you to come home. They're going to do it. I think they're going to take me. The blood drained from my face. I'll be there in 10 minutes, I said, hanging up quickly. Jason grabbed my arm. What's happening? They've got her, I whispered. We're too late. I barely made it to the front door before the phone rang again. It was like the universe was mocking me. I'd barely had a chance to process the shock of what Catherine had done, what she was planning, and now the world was shifting beneath my feet again. Mom? It's me. Her voice trembled through the line, each word heavier than the last. I don't know how much longer I can hold out. He's pushing me. I think they're watching me. I leaned against the doorframe, trying to steady my breath. Who's watching you? What's happening? My heart slammed against my ribs. I had to keep calm. I couldn't afford to let the fear swallow me whole. I don't know. Paul's been asking questions about the house. About the trust. I think he's getting desperate. Please, hurry. The words barely left her mouth before the phone cut off. A deadline. My hand shook as I clutched the phone, the familiar weight of my mother's voice still hanging in the air. Jason had been watching me the entire time. His face was unreadable, but I could see the storm brewing in his eyes. He didn't need to say it. I could feel it. We were too late. We bolted out the door and into the car, the tires screeching as we tore down the street. I couldn't think of anything else. All I could hear was my mother's trembling voice, echoing in my head, pushing me forward. The silence inside the car was suffocating. Jason's eyes were fixed ahead, the tension between us thick enough to choke on. His fingers drummed against the wheel, quick and erratic, like he was trying to keep pace with the chaos that had erupted in our lives. Jason, we have to get there now, I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. I know, he muttered. But I can't shake the feeling that they're ahead of us. Someone's been following us. I froze, his words like a slap to my face. What do you mean? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he glanced in the rearview mirror. His grip on the wheel tightened. I followed his gaze, but there was nothing there. Just the flicker of streetlights, the shadow of cars parked by the curb. Nothing yet, he finally said, his voice dark. But I think we're being watched. I didn't know if he was just paranoid or if it was the truth. Either way, it didn't matter. We had to act fast. My mother was slipping through our fingers. The road stretched out in front of us, but every mile felt like a trap. My pulse quickened. I knew the house. The one my mother had lived in for years. But now, it felt like a cage. A cage that Catherine had been slowly closing in on. As we turned onto the street, I could see the faint glow of lights in the distance. It was too quiet. Too calm. The world around us felt like it was holding its breath. Jason slammed on the brakes. The car lurched forward, and I barely had time to register what had happened before he was already out of the car. Stay here, he ordered. No, I said, my voice sharp. I'm coming with you. He didn't argue, but he didn't look pleased either. I could see the worry in his eyes. He knew how much danger we were in, but I wasn't going to let him face this alone. Not when we were this close. We moved swiftly, staying low against the shadows as we approached the front door. My heart was pounding in my chest, each beat a countdown to something I couldn't control. Something I couldn't stop. Jason reached for the handle, and the door creaked open. I held my breath, but it was quiet. Too quiet. Mom? I called, my voice trembling as I stepped inside. Nothing. Just the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. The house seemed empty, almost abandoned. I could feel Jason at my side, his presence a steady reminder that I wasn't alone in this, but it didn't ease the panic clawing at my insides. We moved quickly through the house, checking each room, each corner. The silence was deafening. It felt wrong. My mother should have been here. Her things should have been scattered around, but it was too neat. Too clean. Then, the door to the study was open. I froze. The room was too dark. It wasn't supposed to be like this. My mother never left the study door open. It was where she kept her important documents, her secrets. We stepped closer. Jason's hand gripped mine for a split second, like he was trying to hold me together. I nodded at him, giving him the permission we both knew we needed. We stepped inside. The desk was empty. Papers scattered across the surface, but the drawers were open. Documents missing. My breath caught in my throat. Where is she? And then I saw it. On the floor, partially hidden beneath a chair, was a small slip of paper. My mother's handwriting. My hand shook as I picked it up. The words were hurried, sloppy. Tell Jason I've gone to him. I had to leave before it's too late. I dropped the paper. The weight of it hit me like a punch to the gut. They've taken her, I whispered. Jason's face was set in grim determination. He grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the door. We're not done yet. We need to get to her before they do. But as I stepped back outside, something caught my eye. A car. In the distance, parked across the street. It was too far to make out the driver, but I could see the silhouette. Someone was watching. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. And suddenly, I understood. Catherine wasn't just trying to steal my mother's life. She was playing a far more dangerous game. I think we've just uncovered the tip of the iceberg, Jason said, his voice tight with fear and urgency. I turned to face him, my mind racing. What do you mean? He didn't answer. He didn't need to. We were running out of time. We pulled up to the house in a rush, the tires squealing against the wet pavement as we parked in front of the gates. It was too quiet. Too still. I felt the weight of the night pressing in, the kind of silence that made the smallest sound feel like a bomb waiting to go off. Jason was already out of the car, moving toward the front door. His movements were sharp, quick. I couldn't keep up. My mind was too full of thoughts, questions, suspicions, fears, but one thing stood out above all the others: we weren't in control anymore. Whoever had my mother was always one step ahead. I glanced at the front door, half expecting it to open, expecting something to happen. My pulse raced. The key we had, it should have unlocked everything, but it was useless now. The house felt like a trap, a place we shouldn't be. Stay close, Jason said, his voice hard as he gave me a look, half warning, half determination. I nodded, but my heart was beating too fast. My body wanted to run, but my mind told me to stay. To be calm. To think. We reached the door, and Jason fumbled with the lock. The metal clicked, and for a moment, it felt like the house was holding its breath. The air was thick. The hallway beyond looked like it had been untouched. But something was wrong. It wasn't the same as before. The shadows in the corners felt darker. The air felt colder. Where is she? I asked quietly, almost to myself. I didn't expect an answer, but I was desperate. Jason stepped inside, scanning the room with precision, his eyes flicking between the walls and the open door to the study. It was wide open now. Too wide. Mom? I called, my voice shaky. It felt stupid saying it. Saying the words made it more real. It made me feel like I was admitting something I didn't want to know. Something worse than what I'd already feared. The room felt emptier than I remembered. Empty but full of lies. Jason moved toward the desk. Everything's gone, he muttered, flipping through papers that seemed useless. Old bills, receipts, nothing important. And yet, they were all wrong. Everything was wrong. I stepped into the study, my footsteps hesitant. Then I saw it. The drawer. Slightly open. But there was nothing in it. Nothing except for a flash of light reflecting off something metallic. I reached out, my fingers trembling as I grabbed it. It was a keycard. A plain one, but it felt like a clue. The kind of thing that could open more than just a door. It felt like it was meant to be found, and the thought made my stomach churn. I held it up, my eyes catching Jason's. What is this? He didn't answer immediately. He was staring at the door, his jaw tight. Someone's here, he said softly. The word sent a chill down my spine. I hadn't heard anything, but suddenly I could feel the tension in the air. My instincts screamed. We were being watched. Not just followed anymore, monitored. The sound of a door creaking, faint and almost imperceptible, made my skin crawl. I turned toward the hallway, heart pounding in my chest. It came again. Louder this time. I grabbed Jason's arm, pulling him back. We need to go. Now. But before we could move, the front door slammed shut behind us. My heart stopped. Someone was here. Someone who didn't want us to leave. Jason's eyes narrowed. Get down. Stay low. We crouched behind the desk, my breath coming in shallow gasps. The footsteps grew louder, closer. Then, a flash of movement at the corner of the hallway. A shadow darting between the doorways. I held my breath. There was no way we were alone. But who was it? Who had been waiting for us? I couldn't help but wonder if this was all a trap. Or worse, if we were walking straight into it. Suddenly, a sharp click echoed through the room. The unmistakable sound of a gun being cocked. I didn't dare move, but my mind was racing. We had no backup, no way to defend ourselves if it came to that. I felt the cold metal of the keycard pressing against my palm. It was the only thing I had, but I didn't know what it would open. What it would unlock. The footsteps halted. The silence stretched on, unbearable. I could feel the weight of the gun behind the door, like it was pointed right at us. Then, a voice broke through the quiet, sending a shiver down my spine. "I've been waiting for you," the voice said, calm but dripping with malice. My blood ran cold. The door creaked open. And then everything changed. I didn't move. I couldn't. I just stared as the figure stepped into the room. For a moment, my mind refused to process what I was seeing. I blinked, trying to clear the fog from my mind. It was someone I knew. But it couldn't be. I barely managed to speak. "No, it can't be." But it was. It was Paul. Standing in the doorway, smirking. The man I thought I could trust. The one who had been in my life for years. The one who had always been there for my family, but who now stood in front of me, weapon in hand. Looking for this? He held up a folder, and inside, I saw the unmistakable symbol of my mother's trust. "Where is she?" I demanded, my voice hoarse with desperation. He smiled coldly. "Right where you'll never find her." I felt my world tilt. Paul. The one person I thought was the key to all of this, now the one pulling the strings. This wasn't just a family betrayal. It was much worse than that. And it was only just beginning. I knew then, in that moment, that the game had changed. And I was no longer in control. I couldn't breathe. Paul's words echoed in my mind like a constant, unbearable hum. "Right where you'll never find her." His smile, cold and calculated, had ripped apart any hope of a clear solution. We were in too deep now, farther than I ever imagined I'd go. Jason didn't flinch. He stood tall, steady, his hand still gripping the folder Paul had taunted us with. His voice was low, controlled, but his eyes were burning with an intensity one knew all too well. "What is this, Paul? What's really going on here?" Paul just smiled wider, like he had all the answers, like we were nothing more than pawns in his twisted game. He stepped forward, holding the folder up higher, as if it was some kind of victory trophy. The air was thick, charged with a tension that made it hard to think, let alone act. "You really think you're in control here?" Paul's voice was a mockery of pity. "You don't know who you're dealing with. You never did." Jason's jaw tightened. "You're not getting away with this. Whatever you're hiding, I'll find it." Paul chuckled, stepping back slowly, a deliberate move to distance himself from us. "You'll try, Jason. But it's too late. The game's already over." I was stuck. Trapped between confusion and disbelief. Every piece of this puzzle was slipping further out of reach, but it was clear now, Paul wasn't just an accomplice. He was the mastermind. I needed a plan, and I needed it fast. Suddenly, a noise broke through the suffocating silence, a faint click, like a lock turning. My heart pounded as I turned toward the hallway. A shadow flickered in the corner of my vision, too quick to catch clearly. Someone, was moving. Watching us. Without thinking, I grabbed Jason's arm. "We need to move. Now." He nodded sharply, his face unreadable, but I could see the panic in his eyes, the same fear I felt building in my chest. We weren't alone anymore. Not with Paul, not with whoever else was lurking in the shadows. We bolted. Jason grabbed the folder, shoving it under his jacket, while I scanned the room, looking for anything we could use. I didn't know what I expected. A hidden door, a weapon, anything. But there was nothing but cold, barren walls and the quiet hum of the house's aging infrastructure. The hallway stretched ahead, dark and empty. We darted forward, the silence pressing down on us like a physical weight. With each step, the tension rose. We were being hunted, and the house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a cage. Then I saw it. A flicker of movement. A shadow against the far wall. It was quick, too quick to be real, like my mind was playing tricks. But when I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps, my blood ran cold. Jason stopped, his head snapping to the side. "Did you hear that?" I nodded, my breath catching in my throat. "We're being followed." Before we could react, the door at the end of the hallway slammed open with a violent force. A man stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, with a grim expression that made my stomach churn. He was dressed in black, his movements purposeful. It wasn't just a stranger. I recognized him from the shadowed corners of my past. Nolan. An old acquaintance of Paul's. Someone I had always suspected but never fully trusted. "Not so fast," Nolan said, his voice a low growl. His eyes locked onto us with a predatory gaze. Jason's hand instinctively reached for something, anything, but there was nothing. No gun, no weapon. Just empty space and the quiet rhythm of our breathing. "You've been busy," Nolan continued, stepping closer, his boots thudding heavily against the floor. "But it's too late to play the hero now." I took a step back, my mind racing. The game was shifting, and I couldn't keep up. "Nolan, what the hell do you want?" I demanded, my voice shaky but defiant. He smiled, but it wasn't kind. It was the kind of smile that made you question everything you thought you knew. "I'm here to make sure things go the way Paul planned." I barely had time to process his words before the front door burst open behind us, the sudden rush of air cutting through the tension. I spun around, expecting to see reinforcements, but what I saw instead stopped me cold. A woman stood there, silhouetted in the doorway, her face partially obscured by the shadows. But I knew her. I had to. It was Linda. My heart skipped a beat. Linda, my mother's trusted ally, was here now? The woman I thought had been on our side all along? She stepped forward, her heels clicking against the floor. "You really thought you were in control?" she asked, her voice dripping with venom. "This is just the beginning." I stared at her, too shocked to respond. How had this gone so wrong? How had everything we trusted come crashing down so fast? Linda didn't wait for an answer. She stepped closer, her eyes cold. "You're in deeper than you think. And now you've crossed a line." "A line? What line?" I tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Jason seemed to get the message. He stepped in front of me, his body tense, ready for whatever came next. "We won't let you get away with this." But the woman, Linda, just shook her head, her lips curling into a smirk. "You already have." The door slammed shut behind her with finality. It was clear now. We weren't in control anymore. Every move we made, every step we took, was part of their plan. The truth was slipping through our fingers, and I didn't know how much longer we could stay ahead of the danger. I turned to Jason, my heart pounding in my chest. "What the hell is going on?" But before he could answer, the phone rang. We both froze. The sound of the phone echoed through the house, unnervingly loud in the oppressive silence. I felt my skin prickle as the phone continued to ring. It was a call I knew I had to take. But I couldn't. Not yet. The silence lingered. And then, a single sentence broke it all open. "Your mother's alive." But not for long. The room was silent except for the rhythmic ticking of the clock on the wall, its hands creeping toward the inevitable moment. My hand shook as I held the phone to my ear, the voice on the other end as cold as the air in the room. "Your mother's alive. But not for long." The words cut through me like a knife. I had already been living in the shadow of fear, but now it was real. The stakes had never been higher. Every choice, every step, every second mattered. We were running out of time. I dropped the phone, my heart hammering in my chest. Jason's eyes were fixed on me, waiting for an answer, but I had none. We were cornered. There was no way out. No escape from the tangled web we'd been caught in. Paul's face, his smug grin, flashed in my mind. The man who'd orchestrated everything, pulling strings from the shadows, thinking he was untouchable. But Paul was wrong. We were still standing, still fighting. And in this moment, we had something he didn't, the truth. I have to go, I said, the words coming out with more resolve than I felt. Jason didn't argue. He didn't need to. He understood. He knew what was at stake, our family, our future. We couldn't let Paul win. We moved quickly, slipping out of the house and into the night. The streets were dark, the air thick with tension. My mind raced, piecing together the clues, the fragments of truth we'd uncovered. It was all falling into place, but the last pieces were the hardest to find. We reached the warehouse. The place where it all would end. I could see it now. The flickering lights of the abandoned building, casting long shadows against the cracked concrete. The smell of rust and decay hung in the air like a warning. Every step I took felt heavier than the last. This was it. There would be no turning back. Jason gave me a look, his face hard, unreadable. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, his voice low. I nodded, though the uncertainty gnawed me. "We don't have a choice. We stop him here, or we lose everything." As we approached the entrance, I could hear the faint sound of voices, low, tense. My stomach tightened, but there was no turning back now. I had to see this through. We pushed open the door, the creak of the metal echoing in the silence. The shadows seemed to stretch on forever, and the dim light made everything feel otherworldly, like we weren't even in the same world anymore. And then I saw her. My mother, bound to a chair in the center of the room, her face pale, but her eyes burning with defiance. She looked at me, a mixture of fear and determination in her gaze. She was alive. She was here. But for how long? "Mom." I rushed to her side, but before I could reach her, a voice stopped me in my tracks. Well. The prodigal daughter returns." I turned to see Paul, standing in the doorway, his face twisted in that familiar smug grin. He was always so sure of himself, so certain he was invincible. But not this time. "You're too late," Paul continued, his voice dripping with disdain. "You've played right into my hands. You think you can stop this? You can't. You never could." "Don't be so sure," Jason said, stepping forward. "You're finished." Paul laughed. "Finished? You really think you can just waltz in here and stop me? You have no idea what you're dealing with." I took a deep breath, gathering every ounce of strength I had left. This was it. The final confrontation. The moment everything changed. "You're wrong, Paul," I said, my voice steady despite the fear swirling inside me. "You've already lost. The truth is out. Your whole empire of lies is crumbling, and there's nothing you can do to stop it." He narrowed his eyes. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know enough," I replied. "I know about the files. The fraudulent transactions. The conspiracy. And I know about the people you've hurt along the way." Paul's smile faltered, just for a second, but it was enough to see. He was rattled. The truth had always been his biggest threat, and now it was closing in on him. "I'm not afraid of you," he sneered. "I'll walk away from this, and there's nothing you can do to stop me." "You're not walking away from anything," I shot back. "You're done." The tension in the room thickened, and for a moment, it felt like time had stopped. The weight of the situation pressed down on me, suffocating. Suddenly, there was a loud crash. The door to the warehouse burst open, and officers flooded in. Detective Rodriguez was at the front, her gun drawn, her expression steely. "It's over, Paul," she said, her voice unwavering. "You're under arrest." Paul's eyes darted to the officers, his face contorting in disbelief. "This isn't how it ends," he muttered, his voice barely audible. But it was. The game was over. The man who had torn our family apart, the one who had tried to destroy everything we held dear, was finally going down. As the officers moved in to handcuff him, I turned to my mother. She was still sitting there, her hands trembling, but there was a light in her eyes, a light I hadn't seen in years. "We did it," I whispered. She nodded, her voice thick with emotion. "We did." The weight of everything that had happened crashed down on me. The lies, the betrayal, the fear, it was all over now. But in its place, something new had begun. Something stronger. We had survived. And we had found our strength in each other. We had fought back against the darkness, against the lies, and in the end, we had won. There was no going back to the way things were. But maybe that was okay. Sometimes, the only way to move forward is to leave the past behind. As we walked out of that cold, empty building, I realized the truth. We were no longer victims. We were survivors. And that made all the difference. In the end, the greatest power we had wasn't in the secrets we kept or the lies we told, it was in the love we shared, and the truth we were finally brave enough to face. And as I looked at my family, I knew one thing for certain, we were going to be okay.